Chapter 6. The Lontachoth Setback. Look at that. It's a web out there, thought Lafier as she floated through space. Her gaze was directed at the big orb of blue and white at Lobnus 2. The assault ship was cramped, even to a member of the race that lived on spaceships. Of course, assault ships weren't built under the assumption that their passengers would be aboard for long stretches of time. Whenever circumstances confined crew to an assault ship, Tobiac, orbital quarters, would be attached. These orbital quarters were the web. Orbital quarters were ships without propulsion methods, and they could self-compress, allowing them to be stored in the hold of a small ship. The orbital quarters connected to the boss roar were of the lowest feature build, and as such lacked a gravity control system. All of the rooms were under microgravity, so the NCCs, who hailed from land worlds, didn't seem to like staying in them. On the other hand, they were taking turns to descend down to the land world, as was technically their mission, so they weren't too dissatisfied. When the Fleet Command Center gave her not a magistrate but orbital quarters instead, Lafier steeled herself to the fact that she would have to stay here for quite some time. 2 months had passed, 2 months in orbit over Lobnus 2. Their orders were to temporarily withdraw from there. Lafier had had every mind to discontinue the annoying relocation operation. She wanted anybody else, to take her post. But the Land World Administration had made a fuss over getting the asylum seekers out by the time they withdrew. Or so she'd been told. It had been her adjunct, Jint, who'd heard out their demands. It's been so long since I've seen him, she thought as she continued staring at Lobnus 2. She spoke to him almost every day over the communication line, but it wasn't the same as seeing him face to face, and over the comms, he never called her Lafier. The Fleet Command Center, it had to be said, was doing well by them. Personnel supply ships were being dispatched more frequently than she'd expected, and so the relocation was proceeding apace. Only the armed guards and the prisoners that sought to escape were left to take. She gently spun in place, and the Lobnus portal placed in orbit over Lobnus 2 came into view. At present, multiple ships were breaching through it. 5 were Seater-class ships, around as big as battle line ships. 3 were amphibious ships, capable of entering the atmosphere, carrying even more migrants from the surface. The scale of the operation had never been bigger, and with this, they'd have them all shipped out in 3 days' time. Captain. Ekryua's hologram came up. A message from the Transport Unit Command Center. I'll receive it on the bridge, said Lafier, who then faced the exit and drifted off toward it. Jint was, as ever, on the surface. The island of Raji had beautiful beaches, too beautiful for a land world with an attitude like Lobnus 2's. Jint liked taking strolls on the sands, especially at night, when he'd listen vacantly to the melancholy sound of the waves and come close to forgetting what had happened during the day. Which mainly entailed listening to Maydine's angry tones and Dokva's pleading. Jint had grown accustomed to Maydine's harsh words, but he still felt a visceral revulsion to Dokva's clinging stare. The wavelets sparkled under the phosphorescent glow of the Lobnus portal above. Samson and the NCCs spent a lot of time swimming in the sea, though of course, not at this hour. They'd invited him to join a handful of times, but Jint had always turned the offer down. He'd never swum in the ocean before, so his mind couldn't help but dwell on what might be lurking beneath the waves. He was frankly phobic. Regardless, he liked looking out on the sea, the smell of salt, the sound of the waves, how the impression it gave shifted with the time of day. I'd love to show this to Lafier, he thought. The most puzzling thing about the OV was how they'd voluntarily discarded gazing across broad panoramas like this. He casually looked up at the phosphorescent portal and witnessed points of light drawing away from it. Naturally, he knew what they were. He'd been informed of the arrival of the transport unit. His joy surpassed Lafier's. Though this wouldn't free him from his position as Lady Agent Adjunct, he'd at least get to leave the surface. The inauguration of the new citizen representative was set to take place after the last of the asylum seekers arrived in orbit. And if everything went according to plan, that would be 4 days from now. They had to hold that ceremony no matter what. If they failed to, the enemy would darken their doorstep. The enemy might just pass through, but he wanted to avoid any unnecessary stress. Needless to say, Jint would be there for the ceremony. But after that, He'd never take another step on this land, even if he were to be appointed Lady Agent Adjunct once again. Dokfu would take over for Maydeen, as anticipated. In the end, there was no election. Instead, the current citizen representative simply designated his replacement. Jint had no say in how the land world chose its representative, nor did he really care. He checked his wrist gear for the time. He should probably go to bed. The next day doubtlessly had many an opportunity for boredom in store for him, too. He about-faced and strode for his lodging. He'd been allocated the swankiest room on the entire planet. The room was built for when big shots came to inspect the place, and it was much more spacious than his Bossroar living quarters. Yet he pined for the Garish Dryor, Count's Manor. That was only 2 beds breadth wide. It wasn't that Lobnus II had no ground vehicles. Jint simply chose to walk. Once he'd neared the halfway mark of his way back, his wrist gear beeped. A new call. And he didn't think it could be good news, a premonition that quickly turned to certainty once Maydeen's hologram popped out. Your Excellency? Maydeen looked on tensely. They're revolting. Come at once. Jint replied that he copied, muttering to himself, and there it is. The office of the chief executive was virtually buried in window screens. Buildings spewing black smoke. Walls lying in ruins. Gun turrets squashed and dented. Men firing their primitive firearms at random. Explosions one after the other. Each screen was a window into another scene of tribulation. The East Zone is attacking the Central Zone, said Maydeen without preamble, pointing at the largest of the window screens. It was a map. The line dividing the 2 zones was playing host to a whole herd of red blips. What are the armed guards doing? They're fighting back, of course. Maydeen moved his pointer finger to another of the screens. Around 10 guards were firing something with weapons that looked to be light guns. Then there's nothing to be worried about, surely. They may be packing some serious heat, but their weapons are still bootlegs in the end. They can't be a match for regulation. They're also in possession of regulation weaponry. Maydeen pointed at yet another screen. Somebody was holding a light gun while surrounded by inmates wildly firing their handmade powder guns. How'd that happen? There was a traitor. Maydeen spat. Someone among the personnel who wished to stay funneled arms to Angu's inspection. More unbelievably still, there are some who are even trading fire with their former coworkers. How many are we talking? I don't know. As far as I can see, at least 500. That's not good. Aren't you being a little overly calm? Said Maydeen, irritated. This is a grave matter. I understand that. How did we get so many insurgents on our hands? Jint knew that hearing the answer to that wouldn't serve them in any way, but he couldn't help but ask. Well, Maydeen faltered. Maybe it's out of loyalty to the UH. But how can that be? Jint cocked his head in puzzlement. I don't fault them for any loyalty they might have, but if that were the reason, why would they join the inmates and fire at their colleagues? How am I supposed to know? Maydeen turned away with a huff. What is going on? The door opened and Shunger stormed in. I'm just as in the dark as you are, said Maydeen. What is going on? You're still in charge of the place. Irresponsible much. Call me irresponsible or whatever you want. It won't change the fact that I don't know, he said, glaring at her. Why on earth is Anguzen acting this way? I just can't fathom what's running through you inmates' heads. Don't lump me in with Anguzen and his boys. Jint cleared his throat. What we know is that you have an extremely serious emergency to resolve. And if there's a way I can assist you, I will. We have an emergency? Why are you putting it like it's not your problem? Then, with a start, she realized, is it not your problem? I'm not under obligation, said Jint. At base, this is a problem for the Land World Administration. But, as I stated earlier, if you request assistance, I will look into it. Then assist us, said Maydeen. All right then, what sort of assistance would you like? Jint replied with a businessman's detachment. Quell the uprising, and quickly. That isn't happening. As I've already told you many times over, the Manor of Our Lady doesn't have ground war capabilities. Then you're all useless, said Maydeen. Jint pretended not to hear that. Have you already contacted Orbit? No, not yet. Okay, I'll tell them myself. Jint dialed the Bossroar's call code into his wrist gear. This is the Bossroar, came Ekriwa's voice. This is the Lady Agent Adjunct. Please pass me to the Lady Agent. Jint faced Maydeen. May I send the feed of the footage being sent to this room to orbit? Just do whatever you need to, he answered exasperatedly. Information link, please. Jint spoke gently into his wrist gear. The code is, Chief Executive, this is the foreman of Gatehouse 28, Kenny. A man's hologram appeared from within the crowd of window screens. Mr. Dokfa is asking to be allowed entry to the administrative zone. Allowed entry? But he's always allowed to enter the administrative zone. It's not just him, sir. He's asking for every inmate in the central zone to be allowed entry. You must be joking, shouted Shunger. If that happens, then there'll be nothing left between the west and east zones. Anguzen's crew will just march on us unimpeded. And my people are working to make sure that doesn't happen, he told the representative of the west. Besides, the administrative zone isn't large enough to accommodate them all. Tell them that the walls are there to protect them. Actually, never mind. I'll tell them myself. But before Kenny could respond, the hologram of Maydine's successor as citizen representative emerged. I'm aware the administrative zone is small, but this is a state of emergency. I ask that you provide us immediate shelter. That's not necessary. We're fighting the East Zone in a manner advantageous to us. But stray bullets are peppering our residences as we speak, said Dokfoy. Multiple people have died. So clear out of the range of stray fire. Around how far is the bullet's reach? Maydeen didn't have a response to that. Dofko continued, I'm not asking you to let us live there. I'm asking for temporary shelter. It's just not feasible. The central zone is plenty big enough. You can find places to hide from oncoming bullets. Then you're not budging. Dokfo bowed and disappeared. If only they were as on the ball as him, thought Jint as he stared at Maydeen and Shunger. This is Gatehouse 28. A different officer came on the line. Now what? What happened to Kenny? Mr. Dokfu and his people are trying to force their way through the gate. Maydeen's expression turned grim. Can you keep them at bay? No, sir. Why not? Give me video. Several new window screens opened up. There lay Kenny, bloody and still. The solid metal doors were open wide, with the inmates passing through. Mr. Dokfu's bodyguards suddenly attacked him and opened the gate. All we've managed to keep is this control room, and then there's no telling how long we can hold on. Those last words were spoken through tears. Chief Executive, this is Tomasov. Video of yet another guard had appeared. If Jint had it straight, Tomasov was the head of the guards. What is it? More bad news, I imagine, said Maydeen. Bingo. My subordinates are under threat of attack by the Central Zone. Dokfa must be a conspirator to the uprising. Maydeen's face turned strangely refreshed. What do we do now? Fretted Shunger. Maydeen promptly began issuing orders. Miss Shunger, go back to the West Zone and have your backers board ship. Tomasov, rioters have penetrated the administrative zone. There's no point defending Wall 2. Have everyone evacuate at once and expel the insurgents from within the administrative zone before focusing all your efforts on defending Wall 3. Your Excellency, yes. Jint took a step toward him. Is it possible to board ship from the West Zone? If there's a seaport or a conveyance ship, then yes, it's possible. An amphibious ship can land anywhere on the sea. Okay. There's no pier, but I'll send the Marine Guard ship. It can't hold too many people, but a boat's a boat. Direct your ship to land as close as possible to the coast. Understood. Jint now saw the chief executive in a new light. But as long as the seaport is in our hands, we should have one ship sent there, right? You're right. Please do so. Wait, so you're letting us board first? Asked Shunger, hardly believing her ears. You're what they're after, fertile women. Otherwise, there would be no reason to stage a revolt now. That's why we have to prioritize your escape. But aren't there female personnel, too? They've got their jobs to do. We'll have them take refuge as soon as possible, obviously. Chief Executive, said Shunger, moved. I never would have thought it, but you're a good man. Of course I am. Everyone on this side of the walls is a good person. Hold on, though. We don't have relocation licenses, said Shunger. Oh, right. Maydeen turned to Jint. There's no time to be issuing licenses. The inmates all have distribution codes. I'd like to use those codes in place of administration-issued relocation licenses for the West Zone residents. Do you mind? I don't mind at all. Relocation licenses were entirely up to the Land World Administration's discretion. Thank you. Shunger's expression turned bright, and she flew out of the room. Jint's wrist gear beeped. Lafier was calling. We have a grasp of the situation, more or less. I am having mechanics Liwing Samson head there now. You're a lifesaver. Jint had totally forgotten about his own safety. Have you already directed the amphibious ship? Yes, I have. The Daxaith will be going to the same place as usual, but I ordered the other 2 ships to land off the shore of the West Correctional Zone. Is that okay? Yep. You made the correct call, as expected of Your Highness the Lady Agent. Don't mock me. Even a child could make such an obvious call. Only, it seems they can't get too close to the coast, where the water is too shallow. Then what should I do? Asked Jint. I leave that to you. Got it. All the while, Maydeen was issuing orders this way and that. God damn it, the chief executive cursed. What's wrong? The Marine Guard ship's been shot down. They can attack targets at sea? It was on duty evacuating the guards that were still remaining at Wall 2. The wall was divided midway through. They blasted the ship when it reached the shore. Looks like they'd strapped explosives to the bilge. I see. Then we can't use a guard ship to ferry them to the amphibious ship. There are 2 guard ships left, actually. That was when Jint realized something important had slipped his mind. With a guard ship, getting people aboard their ship was possible, but how much time was needed to take everyone? How many people can a guard ship take? How fast does it go? Hold on a second. I'll call the ship's captain so they can tell us. The ship's captain picked up immediately, and so they learned that it'd take at least 10 days to get everyone into orbit, and that was being optimistic. Please secure the administrative zone's seaport, no matter the cost. If you don't, we won't make the cutoff for evacuation. I'm doing what I can here. Unless the West Zone has a wharf or pier? Of course not. Only the administrative zone has a seaport. Then can one be constructed? Within 10 days' time? Faster. Can't be done, Your Excellency. All of the construction workers have already relocated. We'll try, though. Might as well. Do it, or else the people staying will come out. That alone, I can't abide by. Please understand, Chief Executive, Your Excellency. We leave land world affairs to you and your people because we have to. If you can just get everybody to the amphibious ship, then we can take it from there. We can take everyone safely to the prison camp. But if you can't lay the path toward getting them from the island to the amphibious ship yourselves, we have a problem. So traversing tens of thousands of light years isn't an issue, but a few ustag of water are insurmountable. That's poetic when you put it that way, said Jint admiringly. In any case, we're fine as long as we can keep the administrative zone's seaport under our control, right? Jint nodded wordlessly, though he knew that was a tall task. The red blips on the map signified belligerence, and so the area whose border was made up of the red blips was effectively the insurgency's territory. And that territory was enveloping the administrative zone's coastline, drawing ever closer to the seaport. Is the amphibious ship still not here? Maydeen's voice was tinged with panic. It's currently flying down through the atmosphere. Jint could tell where it was at all times thanks to his wrist gear. Tell me the truth, Your Excellency, you don't think it'd be better for the insurrection to succeed, do you? Why would I? He replied, shocked. I know you people aren't happy being saddled with a mass relocation. Yet you did a thorough job of it anyway. I hate to say this to our invaders, but I am grateful in my way. Well, thank you. Jint refrained from adding, you really never looked it. If I were to lose my position here, with Dokfu or Anguzen appointed in my stead, they would without a doubt order the relocation plan cancelled, thereby freeing you of this burden. Sure, that would be easier, smiled Jint. But the permission to relocate granted to the inmates of the West Zone would remain in effect, even if the SEF, representative, changed. If the women themselves say they want to board ship, we can't refuse them. Even if the new citizen representative revoked that permission? They can't revoke it if they don't know what's what in the first place. I guess that's true. I can just not tell them. For the first time, Maydeen showed him an amiable expression. As the two of them conversed, the red points of light on the map approached the government buildings. At present, they had penetrated the central park, north of the offices. It appears we have to abandon the building sooner rather than later, said Maydeen. Are you going to the port? No other choice. Though it'll be difficult to give orders from there. If you're headed for the port, then I'll accompany you. There's no real point staying here. Jint spoke into the wrist gear. Mr. Sampson, where are you? I'm sorry, he slurred. We're still at the lodge house. Apparently, my subordinates mistook this surface stay of ours for a vacation, so it took a while to gather. Go to the port for me. I'll meet up with you there in no time. Gotcha. The Port Affairs building of Raji Seaport was an elegant 3-story structure. On this land world where the buildings looked gloomy and bleak even under the bright sunshine, Jint inwardly called it the Loebnis style. The only buildings with any amount of thought paid to their exterior beauty were the inspector's lodge houses and the Port Affairs building. And considering this building was always the first a fresh ships full of prisoners would see, it had to be a product either of irony or of straight deception. Jint was on the top floor along with Maydeen and Samson. The Bosroar's meager land brigade guarded the building, while Shunger was at the west zone, directing its evacuation. A night had passed since the insurrection flared up, and the fact that they'd held on to it was close to a miracle. From the window, they could see the inmates from the west zone filling the plaza by the wharf. The amphibious ship Limsaith caused the seawater to spray as it lifted off. Moments later, the Luisaith showed itself from behind the mountain. Does the ship that left first still have yet to return? Asked Maydeen. Jint didn't know how many times he'd been asked that exact question over just the last hour, but he replied politely. The ship transfer's complete. It's scheduled to enter the atmosphere within the half-hour. Jint had only slept 2 hours, but Maydeen hadn't slept a wink. He was visibly irritated, and not just because of the lack of sleep. There was also the fact that the port area's information functionality was crude indeed compared to the prime office of the administrative building. Why don't you rest for a bit? We have a long way ahead of us, said Jint. Or maybe he just wants me to mind my own business. The one who knows my body best is me. Please don't fuss over me. Okay, sir. Jint shot a look behind him. Samson was nodding off, seated backwards in a chair. That was hardly a surprising sight. He looked about ready to collapse by the time they rendezvoused. If the uprising hadn't broken out last night, and if there was no such thing as sober-upper pills, then the inspector-supervisor of the Bosroar would have been nursing a monstrous hangover right around now. The Luisaith touched down with a splash. The retractable jetty began to swiftly stretch back out to sea, and with that, the crowd at the plaza surged like a wave. Several people seemingly fell into the water. Chief Executive, Tomasov here. His hologram appeared. It's no use. We can't hold East 12th Street for much longer. Jint scanned the map of Raji Island. With East 12th Street overtaken, access between the West Zone and the seaport would be severed. They could be ferried over to the port via airship or sea ship, but they were small and few in number, stalling the operation a great deal. Moreover, the 2 remaining airships were currently locked in battle. Please allow us to extract troops from Wall 3, Tomasov entreated. For a moment, Maydeen stared into space and said nothing. Then, at last, he shook his head. I can't allow that. Wall 3 is the last line of defense. Tomasov was about to reply, but the chief executive forcefully cut the transmission. Your Excellency, may I substitute my staff's ID codes for their relocation licenses as well? Of course, said Jint. I was planning to anyway. Thank you. Maydeen then called Tomasov. Give me an hour. No, it likely won't even take an hour. Defend East 12th until I reach the West Zone. Afterwards, divide the troops into 2. One group is to defend the western sections of Walls 1 and 3. The other is to defend this port to the death. Once every West Zone inmate has boarded, I will allow the troops defending the port to board as well. They may stay aboard and relocate if they wish. As for each group's troop numbers and commanders, they're up to you. Am I understood? But Chief, AM. I understood. Roger. Tomasov saluted. However, might I suggest escape by airship as a potentially superior alternative? We could temporarily call off the mission and send them over there. Maydeen shook his head. No. If the inmates waiting to board ship see an airship flying away from here, they'll get flustered. It might cause an irreversible panic. That didn't occur to me. All right, we'll hold the line for 1 hour. Over and out. Another salute, and Tomasov blinked out. Now then, it's just as you overheard. I'll be joining Ms. Shunger in the west. Your Excellency, I bid you return on that ship. He jerked his chin to point at the Louis VIII. A citizen representative doesn't have the authority to order a lady agent adjunct, said Jint. True. I apologize if I've offended you. Don't worry, I'm not offended in the slightest. That's good. Just take it as a piece of advice, then. Though I'm sure I don't need to tell Your Excellency that. Jint shook Samson awake. Mr. Samson, please take the crew and return to the boss roar. What'll you do, laddie? He asked gently, chin still on the chair's back. I'll head for the West Zone alongside His Excellency the Citizen Representative, see my mission through to the fullest extent possible. Then I can't just go back. I'm your bodyguard. But the boss roar has to enter planar space before long. And the ship needs its inspector supervisor and Sachskoem, mechanics NCCs. Had to hit me where it hurts, huh, said Samson, scratching his head. I mean, they're my guys, so they're competent, but we do have loads to do. With the supervisor out and half the team missing, the people on board would resent us for sure. But doesn't the ship also need its clerk? I have 3 subordinates still up there, and they're all supervisors of their own field, in a way. If I make it back in the nick of time, it should be fine. The stuff that needs a clerk's approval, I can handle at my leisure once I've left this territory nation. Your Excellency, shouted Maydeen, incensed. What are you saying? Things are only about to get truly rough starting now. We don't need your silly heroics getting in the way. I'm not trying to be a hero, said Jint. I'm staying to assess things, essentially. What do you mean? If possible, I'd like to see every last asylum seeker board with my own eyes, but I don't know if that's in the cards. In fact, it's probably safe to assume that the chances of that are near zero. We'll probably have to abort prematurely. And I can assess that outcome more accurately here on the surface, rather than down from orbit. Is this all so you can help even just a few more people escape? Maydeen raised an eyebrow. Jint nodded, and the chief executive laughed. Young Count, in case you aren't aware, allow me to teach you. That is what we call being a hero. Really? Said Jint, miffed. But I'll take your heroics. At least I know now they're not silly, and they'll serve us well. I ask that you accompany me. Now then, time runs short. I know. Samson wasn't entirely convinced, however. Hold on. Won't leaving you behind upset the captain? Let me tell you, I'm not a brave man. I'm content to hear tell of the wrath of the Avriels, and never experience it firsthand. Jint attempted to imagine Lafier bawling at Samson, with equal parts sadness and anger. Why did you leave him behind? Nope. That was beyond implausible. It'll be all right, he said, brimming with confidence. I'll keep in touch. You won't be witnessing Her Highness flip out. Not over this, anyway. That's an I know her best face if ever I saw one, Samson grinned. Oh no, don't fret it. I believe you. Right then, take care of yourself out here, you hear me? You take care of yourself, too, Mr. Samson. Jint and Maydeen's hovercar was passing north over East 12th Street. 2 guards, their escorts, were seated at the front and keeping watchful eyes on either side. Jint was firmly settled on the right rear seat, so he had a good view of the battlefront. The Loebnis-style buildings facing the road were the same as ever. The fires growing at full blast behind them, on the other hand, were notable. It was only a matter of time before the buildings zooming past the car window would succumb. The 4 of them were dead silent. The air was heavy laden. Suddenly, the hovercar veered right. We're going the wrong way. Did you put the destination in wrong? Put in the right path, Maydeen ordered the guards. Startled, the guard on the left stared at their colleague. What are you doing? Maydeen's fingers danced across the rear seat console. Damn it. What is it? Asked Jint. It won't take my inputs. Jint wasn't terribly well versed on the hovercars used in the UH, so he had to ask, does that mean we can't control where we're going? Not from back here, at least. Maydeen glared at his supposed subordinates. The front seat console is being prioritized. I see. Jint knew what this meant, but he was dumbfounded. Another little mutiny, huh? So it would seem. Jint tried gripping the door's handle to jump out, but it wouldn't budge. It's no use. They've got them locked using the console, said Maydeen. What is this? Why are jailers aiding and abetting the inmates? Jint asked, giving up on the door. This is all for sweet, sweet Alkaiki, muttered the guard on the right. The guard's tone was light, but his words had a strangely religious tinge to them. Sweet Alkaiki? Is that the name of your god? The guard didn't answer. For a certain breed, it might as well be their god, Nadine answered for him. Alkaiki is Lobnus tus indigenous narcotic. I heard they were making narcotics here, but yes. I don't know what it's like in the Empire, but in the UH, narcotics are illegal. Yet here, there's free reign to produce and to use. I have no idea who got the ball rolling, but they make the stuff the primitive way, extracting it straight from the plants. Needless to say, we don't let any Alkaiki get exported, but there are those fools even outside the prison population who use. So what Your Excellency is telling me is that narcotics use has seeped into the guards too. Correct? Jint cast another glance at the guards. They were no longer scanning their surroundings. They were just glowering at each other. Gimme your gun, said the one on the right. Never. The one on the left tried to whip it out in their cramped space, but the other was the quicker hand with the better positioning. They breezily pulled the trigger before the loyal guard could shift stances. A laser ray pierced the one on the left, right between his eyebrows. Jint looked away, Madine's words ringing in his ears, inhuman. You two were friends, weren't you? There's something more important than friendship, he answered. Now you see what I was so afraid of, Madine told Jint. In 2 months' time, this planet will be taken over by the junkies. And then it truly will be hell. Well, you should have made that clear to me. And show my weak point to the invaders? Hey, Chief Executive, said the guard, turning to face him with a smirk. Aren't you going to ask what we're going to do to you, or what we have planned? What you have planned? You aren't strong-willed enough to be planning to swear off Alkaiki, that's for sure. As for what you're going to do to us, you're taking us to either Dokfu or Anguzin, obviously. The guard whistled his appreciation. That's why they made you chief. Of course. If I weren't excellent at my job, I wouldn't be a high-ranked civil servant in the UH. Actually, there are plenty of land worlds in the Empire with legalized narcotics, said Jint. You don't have to stay on this planet. Listen to him. Take us back, and I'll let this pass, said Madine. The guard's expression turned serious. No can do. You don't know Alkaiki. It's special. No way there's any in the Empire. I mean, all you'd need is a sample to synthesize the stuff, said Jint. I'm no expert on the science behind it, but from what I've heard, most anything can be synthesized. Synthesized? He looked ticked off now. A synthesized fake could never measure up to the all-natural real deal. I don't know about that, said Jint. Shouldn't you at least give it a shot? If you don't like it, you can just move right back. We might be withdrawing, but we'll return in no time. Out of the question. Why? The guard didn't reply, so Madine sneeringly answered in their stead. The fools quaking with fear over withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawal symptoms? They're taking narcotics that dangerous here. You can't look for safety in drugs manufactured in a prison. That's not all, said the guard, sour-faced. Even if the Empire does conquer the place a second time, by the time you're back, they'll be in control. And they don't forgive traitors. They'll torture me to death. And what you're doing now doesn't make you a traitor, said Madine. I mean traitors, as in people who've betrayed them. They cheer and honor people who betray their enemies. Jint fervently hoped one or more armed guards who weren't bewitched by narcotics would do something to stop the car, but nobody was on the road. Instead, a corner came into view where laser beams, gunfire, and ammunition he couldn't identify were shooting past each other. And he couldn't tell where it was coming from, but a dense shroud of smoke had enveloped the area. This was the front line. I can't bring you back now. It's too late, said the guard, who'd also turned into a bundle of nerves. You should quit while you're ahead, advised Jint. I'm telling you to take us back, shrieked Madine. But the guard kept his mouth shut. Of all the actions he could take, he must have thought that was the most sound. Bullets pierced the car and ricocheted inside. You didn't make it bulletproof? Jint asked Madine, who was likewise ducking for cover. It didn't cross my mind, no. A yelp of pain from in front. The traitorous guard had gotten shot. Just deserts, murmured Madine. But there was no guarantee they wouldn't meet the same fate themselves. Jint, far from feeling triumphant, only curled in even tighter. By the way, Your Excellency, you don't happen to be armed, do you? Breathed Madine. It didn't cross my mind, answered Jint. He could kick himself. Customarily, the OV didn't carry weapons. To the Av, the word weapons referred to huge warships they saw next to no value in feeble personal use firearms. Furthermore, on both his home planet and his second home planet, it had been illegal for civilians to be armed. As such, with the exception of his days on Klasbiel, he'd been a stranger to handheld weaponry. Regardless, given their situation, he perhaps should have carried and concealed a small gun for self-defense. Maydeen clicked his tongue. Now that it's come to this, we just have to hope they're dead. He had no weapon, but he did have a means of communication. He'd use this opportunity to at least message Lafier. He brought his wrist gear to his mouth. Then a voice from above shot down their hopes. "Hey, you two gonna be lying down like that forever?" The guard's face was drenched in blood, but despite all of the bleeding, it seemed it wasn't that grievous a wound. If anything, he was sprightlier than before, thanks to the nervous excitement. Reluctantly, they stretched back up. It was true that the shooting had died down, though great big fires raged behind them. So we escaped that mess, thought Jint, a shudder running down his body. A figure came into view on the road, who promptly hid behind a building. The guard leaned out of the window. "Don't shoot. I've got the chief executive with me. Tell whoever your leader is. I've already run it by, Jint was right cheesed. What am I the spare?